While going through the list of games we've left to cover on Viridian Flashback, I've noticed that a few of them just happen to be based on either movies or TV shows, and we know how those can be. They're either hit or miss. In fact, some of them just really aren't worth talking about by themselves. So I figured I'd make things interesting and take about a handful of them and talk about them in a video. You know, kind of like 4 back-to-back minisodes. There's no real particular theme, just games based on movies or TV shows. That's pretty much it. So let's start things off with a game based on a movie that I never thought in a million years would get a video game, let alone on the Xbox. The Great Escape. Based on the 1962 film of the same name, the game places you in the shoes of the 4 prisoners locked up in Nazi prison during World War II, trying to escape. While each character plays similarly, they each have their own special talents that make them unique from one another. MacDonald can speak German, making passing as a guard much more easier. Henley, being a pickpocket, can steal papers, keys, and more with ease, as well as having to lead a forger named Blythe around due to him going blind. Hiltz is great at lockpicking, and Sedgwick can fix mechanical devices. Each stage has you completing certain tasks in order to progress in your escape. While there are some guns and grenades you can use, stealth and subterfuge are your most valued weapons here. Sadly though, the controls don't work too well with that gameplay style. Moving your character is very stiff and janky, almost as if the devs couldn't decide to go with tank controls or a more analog approach. This is especially apparent with the few times you're driving a vehicle. As far as combat goes, it's really just letting the auto-aim target an enemy and fire with your gun, as well as a melee/grapple button. Again, you can tell that this was not the intention of the game, as these methods are more for buying you time to escape as opposed to just laying down fire to kill everyone. However, the game does work well with its other elements like repairing devices, lockpicking, that sort of thing. It's a shame that the controls weren't tightened up a bit before release, because this isn't that bad of a game. Visually, The Great Escape isn't terrible. The level design is a bit basic, with prison camps, castles, a train, and some cities, along with the countryside. They're not terrible by any means, just standard. As for the characters, they look good for early 2000s video games, and the devs did get Steve McQueen's character to look somewhat like him. Speaking of Mr. McQueen, sound clips of him from the film are used here in the game, along with the new cast of actors for the main roles, as most of them had passed away by the time of the game's release. Truthfully, they do a good job here, and not much else to say on it.
Hello, I'm John Rose, the senior British officer. You must be MacDonald. Where did the Jerry's bag you?
We were over Berlin. The flak was so dense you could almost walk on it. We were hit very hard.
Terribly bad show, old chap. Luckily, we have a good escape organization here, so you won't have to stay long. This is for you, smuggled in from Blighty in a parcel. It's a compass. The needle indicates where your next objective is. Use it to locate and speak to the camp's Big X. He's coordinating all of the camp escape activity. Our Big X here is George Alexander in Hut 2. Look out for the guards when you go outside the hut.
Thanks very much.
As for music, parts of the film's score by Elmer Bernstein are used here, as well as some original pieces, and it's rather well done. Like I mentioned at the beginning, The Great Escape is an odd choice for a video game, at least for 6th-gen consoles. However, it does seem to work rather well, if you can successfully wrestle around the controls. Otherwise, that might turn away stealth genre enthusiasts. If you're a fan of the film and want to experience the escape for yourselves, this one's not a bad option. Regardless, any game that lets you play as Steve McQueen is a plus. So The Great Escape, a great film, an okay game. But now, let's turn our attention to a game based on a film that kinda got forgotten with time, even though the premise alone should have made it a blockbuster. Let's check out Reign of Fire the game and see if it fares better than the movie. For those who may not have seen it, or knew it existed, Reign of Fire is a 2002 sci-fi action film starring Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey. In the distant future of 2020, vicious dragons had emerged from underground and have scorched the earth, and it's up to Bale and McConaughey's characters, Quinn and Van Zandt respectively, to take out the source of the dragon so that humanity can reclaim the earth once more. At least, that's the short version of the film's plot. I remember seeing this one only once in theaters and thinking it was okay, nothing fantastic. Of course, post-apocalyptic times and dragons do make for a good game, and well, this one came out 4 months later. Here, the story is divided into 2 campaigns. On the human side, you play as a new recruit to Van Zandt's squad of hunters known as the Kentucky Irregulars, who are in London to take out the male dragon known as the Bull, so that the female dragons can stop reproducing. And so, you'll play out said missions in order to achieve that goal. Enough said. Meanwhile, once you complete the humans campaign, you'll unlock the dragon campaign. This one's a bit of a prequel to the film's events, where you play as a young female dragon chronicling her life from the beginning of the Human-Dragon War up until the timeline of the film, undertaking certain missions like destroying bases and freeing captive dragons. And that's it. You can easily tell that this was a cash grab title and there's not much motivation in the story, so it's up to the gameplay to carry it along, and it's half and half, literally. With the humans, you go through a series of missions, each having their own objectives to complete in order to progress. Same with the dragons. You have a truck, tank, fire truck, and dune buggy at your disposal, all equipped with a minigun and secondary weapons that can be refilled via pickups on the map. It's all pretty straightforward stuff, however, the one thing that just bogs it all down are the controls. There are two settings to choose from, but really it all boils down to whether or not you want to drive with standard controls or drive it like a warthog from Halo. Either option doesn't really matter because the vehicles are way too slippery, causing you to bounce all over the place. Because of this, you'll want to just park and take out enemies. However, most of the fire-breathing dragons will finish you quick when you stand still. Really, there's not a lot to talk about with the human side of Reign of Fire. What you see is there, and it gets kind of boring. What sucks more is that you have to beat this half to see what the dragons are all about. Well, I can tell you that the dragons do fare better, but not by much. Gameplay here is more akin to Star Fox 64, more importantly the all-range areas of Star Fox. You fly around with a boost, brake, hover, and enemy grab for flinging tanks and trucks like weapons. You also have a fire blast and a napalm breath that works well for clearing out ground troops. The only thing I'd say that's a flaw for controlling a dragon is aiming the fire. The target icon is hard to see and can sometimes be finicky when you're aiming, meaning you'll probably need to make a few more passes to ensure your enemy's toasted. Truthfully, I think the game should have just been the dragons, as I had more fun playing their campaign. I mean, I get that you need a human story as it is about their survival, but their half of the game needed a lot more work before release. On the visual side, it's an early big green game, so it can be forgiven if it doesn't look so hot today. The vehicles and dragons do look faithful to what you see in the film, and the NPCs on the ground are, well, they're there. As for London, it's dark, gray, brown, scorched, and burnt, so in other words, matches the movie just fine. Of course, being a movie tie-in, scenes from the film are peppered in here and there because they had to utilize that DVD space somehow. As for audio, the music is your standard orchestral epic action pieces, the kind we've heard many times here on the show, while the voice acting is okay. Obviously, they didn't get any of the actors to voice their characters, but it's not a big loss. Reign of Fire seemed like a movie whose premise would fit a game perfectly, and it does. It's just a shame that it wasn't a better game. Again, while I did enjoy the dragon's story, the overall whole package just isn't that great and ends up being as forgettable as its source material. While I can't recommend this one, if what you've seen here intrigued you at all, this one is pretty cheap to pick up. It's sad to hear about Reign of Fire because I feel it had really great potential to be an awesome franchise. But now let's go from a video game based on a forgotten film to a game based on a film we really wish we could forget. Catwoman. Is it better than the movie? Well, if it is, it's not that big of a bar to leap over. Now, I'm sure most of you skipped Catwoman when it came out in theaters, but I'll give you the short version of the plot because, frankly, I don't want to talk about it any more than I have to. Halle Berry plays Patience Phillips, a timid employee of a cosmetics company ran by Laurel Harder, portrayed by Sharon Stone. When Patience learns that their new product has some horrible side effects, she's disposed of by being flushed out into the ocean and drowned. However, she's brought back by a magic cat and is now a Catwoman with powerful abilities. With her new powers, Patience, now as Catwoman, seeks answers for why she was killed and exacts justice. Oh, and Sharon Stone gains stone skin from that cream she's hawking, and Halle Berry and her have a big fight at the end. God, I actually feel horrible writing and saying all of this. You see why it tanked at the box office? Anyway, the game's plot follows that of the movie with some pieces here and there made to fit a video game. That's all I have to say about it, so we're moving on. Catwoman is an action platformer where you must use your feline abilities to get through each stage. Climbing, jumping, wall running, and using your cat sense to see things and objects to aid you. There's also the combat system that utilizes different moves and combos that adds points to your score, which in turn earns you diamonds that you can spend on new moves. So far, this sounds like a standard tie-in platformer, and it could be better than the movie it's based on. There's just one problem with all this. This game sucks hard. First off, the controls are horrendous. For some reason, the developers decided to go as simplistic with controls as possible. The only face button that works is Y for cat vision. To crouch and run, you hold the left trigger and the right trigger jumps. And as for combat, it's all mapped to the right stick, like typical EA games tended to be. Yeah, it's nice to be able to attack in all directions, the combat just isn't smooth enough to work with the right stick fighting. On top of that, you can't just take out enemies by beating them up, that only stuns them. You have to knock them into certain environmental hazards to truly defeat them, and when you're fighting more than one goon, this is pretty annoying. But the true villain of Catwoman, more vile than a stone-faced Sharon Stone, is the camera. Taking cues from a survival horror game, the camera is fixed most of the time and it makes tricky platform jumps a damn nightmare. And trust me, you'll be doing certain parts over and over again. I can honestly say that due to the terrible camera and stupidest control layout I've seen in a game, that I got a little over halfway in this one before I threw in the towel. And you know what? I honestly don't care if I ever beat this game. It's bad and it sucks. As far as everything else goes, yeah, it looks good. The characters are well designed, and Catwoman looks like a digital Halle Berry. The stages, well, to me anyway, all look like one big run-on stage. There wasn't a lot of variety in the levels I was able to get through. Warehouses, nightclubs, alleyways, they all look the same. Since they couldn't get Miss Berry to reprise her role, voiceover legend Jennifer Hale steps into the part, and she does a good job emulating Halle Berry's voice. As for the rest of the cast, they're pretty forgettable.
They say each cat follows her own secret path. Some paths, like my own, begin in the dark.
The camera's picked up a female with cat ears and a tail. You think it's her?
Is it Halloween, Sergeant?
What? Oh, no,
Then it's her, and this time she's not slipping the collar.
Catwoman, this is Detective Lone, Metro Police. Exit the building slowly, hands in the air. You got 5 seconds.
I didn't have high hopes coming into this game since it's based on one of the worst films of all time, but I was hoping it'd be a little better than the source material. It's not. In fact, I think it might be worse. It's not worth playing, not worth collecting, it just needs to be forgotten. And the barb that cuts the deepest here is that this game was developed by Argonaut Studios, the guys behind Star Fox. Hell, this was their last game before shutting down. Of course, not counting the SNES Classic release of Star Fox 2. Man, what a way to go. So yeah, Catwoman was unsurprisingly a dud. Go figure, you saw that one coming. But now for the final game of our episode, we'll be looking at a title that's based on a film, based on a classic legend, with a certain kind of twist. I'm of course talking about 2004's King Arthur. The story of 2004's King Arthur takes the legendary tale and switches up a few things, the biggest being that Arthur is a Roman soldier as opposed to being a medieval knight. And while the majority of the characters are here, like Lancelot, Guinevere, and Merlin, there's no magical aspect to the story, instead focusing on Arthur and his knights taking on one last mission before they're relieved of service to bring back a family of importance, saving them from the invading Saxons. What follows is an interesting story that takes the journey of Arthur to becoming king and it freshens it up a bit, without changing too much. Thankfully, the game follows the plot of the film to a T, complete with scenes directly from the movie. They even do that neat transition from film footage to CG cutscenes that the Lord of the Rings games did. Hell, they even do film to CG to in-game scene transitions. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, King Arthur borrows heavily from those games as you'll hack and slash throughout the 6 chapters, playing through the story. You'll play as Arthur and his knights, choosing which one you want to play, with the option to have a friend come along. You have your standard attacks and dodge, like in any game of this type, along with ranged bow attacks, as well as some sections where you ride horseback while fighting. Besides power-ups that boost your stats temporarily, you can permanently raise said stats at the end of the level through the experience you earn, just like the Lord of the Rings games. Really, there's not much of a difference between those games, though there is a few things that keep King Arthur from being as good, if not better than that other king, mainly in its difficulty. On the surface, Arthur's not a tough game, it's more in the enemy AI. More often than not, a group of soldiers will gather around you and start swinging, ignoring most of your attacks and blocks. However, they can lock you in a damage loop pretty fast, causing you to restart. Oh, and there's no checkpoints. Considering that most of the levels run pretty long, that can be a deal breaker to some. But surely though, there's some nice bonuses for your troubles playing through the game, yes? Well, you unlock making of videos and battle arenas that are average, something you won't spend a lot of time on. Visually, King Arthur's not too shabby, with character models that do an alright job of capturing the look of the actors. Hell, at least they didn't alter Keira Knightley's body like they did on the poster. And yes, this is a thing that happened, and it's pretty stupid. Meanwhile, the levels you traverse are just as well represented from the film, like the battle on the frozen lake and the final battle with the Saxons. On the musical side of things, the soundtrack's pretty good, with wonderful orchestral pieces that I can't remember if they're part of the film or not. Either way, they fit the game quite well. As for voice acting, while none of the film's cast reprise their roles for the game, the cast they hired does a good job filling in for them. Technically, the main cast is in the game via the film scenes, but tomato tomato.
Now hear me. A large and terrible army is coming this way. They will spare no one, no thing. Those of you who are able should pack and begin to move south toward Hadrian's Wall. Those of you who are unable shall come with us when we leave this place.
There is much evil here, more than you can imagine.
Dagonet, I have a job for you.
Stop him, you fools!
King Arthur doesn't do much to stand out from the other movie-based action games that came out around that time, but it's not all that bad. It could have been a better title, but with the pain in the ass AI, you're better off playing more balanced action titles. However, like Reign of Fire, fans of the film should give this one a go, as, if anything, it's a decent companion piece to the movie. Well, there you go. 4 games based on 4 movies, and what an interesting batch. I mean, none of them are particularly amazing, but a few of them are at least worth one playthrough. Except for Catwoman. That one can burn in a fire for all I care. Well, that's going to be it for me for this time, but I really hope you enjoyed this kind of batch-style episode format I did for this. There's going to be more of them coming, since these are kind of easy to burn through, and well, it's better to bundle them up. But until then, this is the Dali Popka saying, as always, stay green, my friends. I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of me and the Big Green, then click that subscribe button and the bell to get notified when new content arrives. I want to say a special thank you to my patrons for helping not just the channel grow, but me as a creator. You have my forever thanks. If you're interested in the channel and would like to help it grow further, consider becoming a patron today. For the cost of a soda or an item on the dollar menu, you can help myself and the channel provide the best source of Big Green programming and more. Once again, all the thanks and love.